friends, and welcome back to Ghouls Night In, the spooky chat show with your best ghoul friends. I'm Penny Snark.
And I'm Midge Munster. And today, Penny, I want to talk a bit about one of my personal favorite childhood shows. We're going to have a bit of a Big Wolf on Campus Uno reverse
Ooh,
here. But I wanted to start by reading some reviews for this show and see if you
ooh,
can guess what we're talking about
all
today.
right.
Okay. So we've got two. The first is a fascinating and textured mixture of cartoon and horror movie conventions, just a joy to watch. And the second is the backgrounds are rich and imaginative. They composite a lot of show over real photos and occasionally integrate CGI into the cartoon. The look is weird and ethereal, just like the show itself. Name that show.
Um, all right, this is somewhat of a cheat because I remember you talking about this on a previous
Uh
episode.
huh.
I'm gonna guess Courage the Cowardly Dog?
It is Courage the Cowardly Dog. Beep, beep, beep,
Hey!
beep, 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 beep. Did you watch much Courage growing up?
I I was scared of this show.
You,
I did not watch the show because I would see the commercials for it and I would be freaked out and I did not
it
watch
was it
it.
was really scary. I still to this day find a lot of these episodes really spooky. But we're going to dive a little bit into just the background, the making of the show, and some possible kind of origins and theories and different things relating to it, um, and get into what made this so spooky.
Lay it on me.
So, if you are not familiar with the show, Courage the Cowardly Dog was an American horror comedy series. It was just about an adorable little small kind of purple pinkish beagle who was named Courage. And the backstory was that he was abandoned as a puppy and adopted by this older Irish woman named Muriel. And Muriel and her crotchety American husband live in a town called Nowhere, which actually was supposedly in my neck of the woods, Nowhere, Kansas. I
Hey.
think I've been there. And they live in this like isolated farmhouse. There seems to be no one around for miles. And in each episode, Courage and Eustace and Muriel would get like some kind of encounter with either like an unsavory human character or some kind of paranormal or alien phenomenon. And it usually falls on Courage to save his owners from whatever threat is occurring. The fun kind of thing about it was that usually Eustace and Muriel were completely unaware of the danger. And so there has also often been speculation that the monsters only existed to Courage,
Oh.
and that the kind of idea is that you're seeing the world through this small, afraid dog's eyes. So, like, normal things look horrifying to him, which, like, I get it, King.
Relatable.
Anxiety disorders are real. um, but it was a really very fun show, and I watched this religiously growing up, which actually, like, looking back, kind of surprises me because, as you said, it was really scary.
Yeah, I'm impressed.
I know, I'm so brave. So this series was created by a gentleman by the name of John R. Dilworth for Cartoon Network. But before it was a series, Courage the Cowardly Dog was created as a 7-minute animated short. And Dilworth pitched it to Hanna-Barbera's animated short showcase called What a Cartoon!
Hey.
And the pilot of Courage, that was titled The Chicken from Outer Space, aired on Cartoon Network on February 18th, 1996. And you may possibly remember, you Penny, you yourself
Me?
may possibly remember that short. If you owned a VHS, I'm so sorry. My voice said no, not today.
Mm-mm.
If you owned a VHS copy of what famous film with some hot ladies? Scooby-Doo and the Witch's Ghost.
Hey, I do love that that movie.
That the Courage the Cowardly Dog, Chicken from Outer Space was featured as the short before that film, as a lot of like
Yes,
Hanna-Barbera.
that does sound familiar.
Yeah, as a lot of Hanna-Barbera animation movies did, they would feature like a little cartoon before the movie, and in this one it was Courage's premiere to the world. Uh, so that segment, The Chicken from Outer Space, was actually nominated for an Academy Award for Best Animated Short Film.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And even in looking at that first piece, you can start to see how stylistically different it was from anything else on the market at that time. The pictures and the picture frames around the house are like real photos of humans involved in the production. And so there's this kind of unsettling mix of
Mhm.
reality and cartoon. But unfortunately, they lost that nomination to Wallace and Gromit.
Ah.
Ah! But out of that, the short was greenlit to become a series for Cartoon Network, and the show Courage the Cowardly Dog premiered on November 12th, 1999, and ran for 4 seasons up until November 22nd of 2002, with 13 episodes per those 4 seasons, which every time we do something like this, we had the same thing with like Munsters and Adam's Family. I'm like, surely there were more episodes
I
than that.
know, right?
It
It's like,
always,
no.
it always feels like. And now, granted, they were like, uh, 25-minute episodes or whatever for TV, but within each episode, there were two like 11-minute segments.
Mhm.
So there were kind of 2 episodes within each of those 13, but still, it seems like more. There have been several attempts at reviving the show, including what is, in my opinion, the most unsettling of the Courage universe. They did a CGI, completely CGI special
Ooh.
in 2014 called The Fog of Courage. And it's so upsetting to see them rendered in like 3D space. I absolutely hated it. um, and then in June of 2021, not too long ago, there was a direct to video animated crossover featuring once again our other favorite cartoon dog, and there was a film called Straight Outta Nowhere, Scooby Doo meets Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Scoobert Doo.
Scoobert Doo. And so you can actually stream that film as well as all of the original episodes of Courage the Cowardly Dog on HBO Max right now. So if you want to see Scooby Doo and Courage get mixed up in nowhere, that's where you can find that. So that's kind of the background of the show. Now I want to obviously get into what made this so ooky spooky. And what stands out for me, like I said a little bit ago, is this mixed media style of animation. Was unlike anything we had seen before, and in my opinion, unlike anything we've really seen since. So, Dilworth, the creator, said in an interview that he drew inspiration from this. I don't know why this quote like makes me laugh. Drew inspiration from Looney Tunes mixed with the surrealist paintings of Salvador Dali.
No, of course. The two most natural things to combine.
Exactly. Um, which, yeah, I can't think of two things more different, really. Um, but that was what this show excelled at, was kind of jarring the viewer. And they were very specific about never using like violence or gore really at
Mhm.
all. They didn't use gore at all. There was never any like of that type of scare. So it was really just this unsettling uncomfortability created by the visuals of the show and
Mhm.
the design of the characters. And one episode in particular that sticks out to me, and probably anyone listening to this podcast who watched Courage the Cowardly Dog, is The Curse of King Ramses. And even if you have not seen the show, you've probably seen this episode memed on the internet because it became very memeable back in like, I feel like in the during the panini there were lots of memes happening.
Very true.
But in an otherwise like flat world, they rendered this King Ramses character in like a three-dimensional CGI, and I rewatched this episode in preparation for this episode. And still to this day, it is one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. Are you familiar with the image where he's, like, in the shroud and he's kind of, like, waving back and forth in the desert?
Maybe? I'm Googling it now.
Yeah, look it up real quick, and I bet you'll immediately be like, "Oh, yeah."
Courage King. Oh, yes. Yes, I know this.
You know that guy.
I know that
Yep.
guy. Don't
And
like
he
that guy.
nope, and he does this, like, "Return the slab," which also I found out in this research was voiced by John Dilworth, the
Hey.
creator, but it's just such a weird juxtaposition both visually, and then there's, like, this King Ramses song that they do, which I was researching about the score for the show because so, for a lot of cartoons and animations and things, they have kind of stock libraries of
Yeah.
sounds and music and things. They were really specific in Courage the Cowardly Dog that they wanted to only use things that were like new to the show itself so that they weren't recycling anything.
Mhm.
And they got nominated for several different awards throughout the course of the show for sound design. Um, and there's they were trying to think of the most upsetting thing that they could think of to do for the King Ramses song, and they were like, "What if it was terrible disco?" And so there's, like, this very weird King Ramses disco song, and it's just like an acid trip, but it's
Yeah.
so good and horrible at the same time. Uh And one of my favorite little fun facts about this, that is one of my favorite things that has ever been done to children, is that out of all like 50, what would that be, like 55-ish episodes of Courage, um, the King Ramses Curse episode was what was featured at the end of the VHS of Scooby Doo and the Alien Invaders in 2000. So you're watching a little Scooby-Doo alien adventure, and then out of nowhere, with zero context, you get this freaking nightmare fuel of an episode of Courage the Cowardly Dog, and I think that's so funny.
They're like, "This is the one."
uh, I never had any Scooby-Doo VHSs, but if you were a person who experienced this and got blindsided by King Ramses' curse, I would love to hear about it because I think that is so funny. Uh,
I'm grateful. I don't think I ever watched that Scooby-Doo VHS, and I think I would have been very disturbed.
yeah, yeah. And that's like kind of surprised because I feel like that would have been right at the peak of our Scooby Doo watching time. 2000
Yeah.
would have been like the age that I was really into that. But uh, do you from the commercials and things? Because obviously you didn't sit and watch episodes, but
Mhm.
is there any like creature or thing that stands out that you remember seeing and being jump scared by?
Oh gosh. I feel like I was overall, like, very, like, kind of, like, put off by the animation style.
Yeah.
Like, I've always felt, like, kind of uneasy with that sort of, like I feel like, it's not dissimilar to, like, a Ren and Stimpy style of, like, character
Yeah.
design and stuff, and I
Mhm.
always was, like, slightly freaked out by those. I remember, and this is going to make you're going to laugh at this because I'm always the one who is, like, stoic and firm about
Right.
things. But I was always extremely upset as a child by characters not being believed or by being blamed for things. So, like, I used to get, like, intense, like, secondhand anxiety with, like, a lot of,
Mm.
like, Disney shorts with, like, Pluto in them, where, like, Chip and
Oh,
Dale play mean tricks on him, and Mickey, yells at Pluto about it.
yeah.
And I remember, like, the, like, crotchety old man being just like, "What you doing, dog?" And I just, like, felt, like, anxious for
Sure.
courage, and
Yeah,
that kind
Eustace
of
is the
added on
worst.
to, like, my discomfort, so that was something that I remember. I was, like, very, very sensitive to that kind of, like, secondhand, like, cringe.
Sure. Well, and that's, also what was so interesting, not just about Courage, but about cartoons in this era in general. I feel like kind of got away with things that now you could never put on and be like, "This is for children," I
Yeah.
think, because it dealt with a lot of really dark, deep stuff outside of, the horror aspect. Because yeah, I mean, Eustace, like, watching it back now as an adult, I'm like, he's pretty abusive to Muriel and the dog, and, like, even the villains, some of them have, like, really tragic backstories, and I feel
Mhm.
like the writers and creators were really specific about trying to make all the characters as sympathetic as possible,
Yeah.
and being like, these bad guys don't just do bad things to be evil, they have trauma.
Trauma.
Which is like a heavy thing for a 6-year-old.
Right, for a child to be like, "Ah, the complexity of the universe."
Oh, the duality of man.
Ah.
Yeah, but yeah, it is a very heavy subject matter a lot of times, which is fascinating. I very my which I've watched, like I said, rewatched a couple episodes, and I haven't gotten to this one yet. The other one that upset me so much was, it was Freaky. I think it was Freaky Fred was his name, and he was like a barber, and he had this like really wide smile, and any kind
Ooh,
of like body distortion like that freaks me out.
yeah.
I just remember he was like a sadistic barber that was obsessed with, like, he could, like, it was almost like compulsive, like he couldn't stop cutting people's hair, and then they would be like bald. Like he like shaves Courage and shaves all of his fur off.
Oh my goodness. I think I remember seeing, like, Courage as, like, a little naked potato
Yeah.
guy, and I
Yeah.
was like, "Don't like that."
Don't like that. Well, that's
Oh,
like,
I
even saying that
also
out loud, I'm like, that sounds horrible.
it does.
I
I
don't know.
remember, like, as I'm just, like, looking through it, I know that I saw this, like, little red fox guy, fox devil guy.
Yes, well, if it's what I'm thinking of, it's the Cat's Motel episode, which was based
Yes.
on Psycho.
Alright,
Um,
yeah, I don't think I watched the episode, but I remember this
that
character
character,
from, like, imagery.
that's a cool episode too, because he has, like, all these pet spiders and bugs and stuff that he tries, like, he plays, like, games with his victims, and if they lose, he'll, like, feed them to the spiders. And I think it's that episode, there's a scene with, I guess that makes sense because it's Psycho, like, it's based on Psycho.
Mhm.
Muriel's, like, in the bathtub, and one of the spiders comes out, and she's, like, holding the spider between her toes to, like, keep it from biting her face. That's
Oh
a
my
really
goodness.
specific memory that just unlocked in my brain. There was also one where there was, like, this villain was, like, a foot fungus, and it was, like, a purple
Ooh.
foot with green warts, and the big toe would, like, talk.
That sounds very, very much animation of this time.
Right, right. So if you too were scarred by courage, then uh, but there is another element of this that I wanna get into that is kind of outside the show itself, because in 2020 there was a moment where Courage the Cowardly Dog was really back
Mhm.
on the webs, and there was like an info meme circulating forums and Reddit and all that, that was claiming that Courage the Cowardly Dog was based on a true story, not with like a talking foot, obviously, but
With a tie. When there was that mad barber and also this,
yeah, and also a
creepy
cat running a motel with its pet
yeah.
spiders. I remember. Pepperidge Farms remembers. But no, it was this photo of a house that looked suspiciously like Eustace and Muriel's house in the show.
Mhm.
And it had like a little info text at the top that said, like, "Oh, Courage the Cowardly Dog is based on the true story of an elderly couple who lived in this house and repeatedly witnessed a lot of strange paranormal activity, and that they had had a run-in with what they claimed was a skinwalker, and then it was basically said that they reported these paranormal incidences, and then right after that they went missing without a trace, and all that was like found in their house was their dog.
I think I remember seeing this.
Yeah. So that was the meme, which, as we know, is one of the most trusted sources
Oh yes. No
of
one
our
could no
time.
one could put text above a photo if it wasn't true.
Exactly. Uh, so there seems to be no real evidence to back up this claim, as I can find. Um, However, there does seem to be some connections to real world things and like real cold cases that could
Mm.
possibly kind of tie this all together. Um, and the house in question in that first meme photo thing was located in New Mexico. So there is an actual cold case from an elderly couple that lived in a historic neighborhood called Kern Place in El Paso, Texas, not New Mexico, but it is right next to New Mexico. And their names were William and Margaret Patterson, and they went missing without a trace. And they were last seen on March 6th, 1957, by a neighbor who was bringing over some Girl Scout cookies.
Mm.
Nice.
Nice.
But the neighbor said that when she went over there, she felt really unwelcome, and that the wife, Margaret, seemed really upset, and that William, like, clearly did not want her there. And they disappeared the next day and, like, left all their belongings, dishes still in the sink. They had a fur coat at the dry cleaners, and their cat was still in the house. So some similarities there, definitely. Obviously, not a dog.
Mhm.
Um, but it's a really interesting cold case because they like this has nothing to do with Courage the Cowardly Dog. It's just really fascinating. They like got sent their accountant got sent a telegram like 6 days after their disappearance from W.H. Patterson, which William's middle name was like Duncan. So I don't know
Mm.
why they were like, yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. W.H.
Sure.
Patterson, that's him. And said to like distribute all their assets, and ended up distributing like their business because they owned a business like to their competitor, which
Hmm.
like seems extremely
Sus.
fishy. Um, and yeah, so there's, rumors that they were murdered. There's rumors that they were spies and that they got like a, up and go command and whatever. But it was said that reports several times that they were seen in New Mexico after their disappearance. But they were never found, and they ended up being declared dead in 1964, which is quite a few years. They went missing in 1957.
Yeah.
Um, but so this could be possibly some inspiration if that meme is based in any truth at all. This could be the case that they are referring to, and
Spooky.
yeah, and it kind of like does tie in with some of the fan theories that Courage the Cowardly Dog is like taking place in purgatory, more or less. There's kind of
Oh.
fan theories that they're because there seems to be nothing else there except the house with these two people and the dog and then all these monsters, that they are trapped in some kind of middle ground and can't get out. And so if these people kind of went missing into the ether, they could be trapped in this purgatory space.
Yeah.
uh, the other story that possibly ties in to courage is a lot more sinister. If any of our listeners are also true crime people, you are probably familiar with the name David Parker Ray, also known as the Toy Box Killer. Very,
Mm.
very, very, very horrible individual. But Ray abducted and murdered women from a town called Truth or Consequences in New Mexico and surrounding areas. And there is a secondary image that has also circulated online in Courage the Cowardly Dog forums showing what is supposedly, quote, the real Courage house, which is different than the one in the info meme. Um, and it does look literally exactly like the Courage the Cowardly Dog house, like down to the windmill and the positioning of the house on the road, like everything about it is identical. Now, whether or not that is a real image, I don't know, but it does circulate from time to time. And so, supposedly, this house is the house of one of Ray's victims in the town Truth or Consequences. Um, and, you know, because of this correlation, there have been people who have tried to maybe tie the events that happened with the Toy Box Killer to the events in Courage the Cowardly Dog, just in the sense of gaining access and trust to people and coming into their homes and causing a ruckus. And because Ray was said to have had nearly 60 victims, most of whom's remains were never found, his time as an active serial killer was really closely linked to the legends and stories of the New Mexico Skinwalker,
Mm.
because people were trying to understand why there
Yeah,
were mass
where are people
disappearances and
going?
where are people going in this middle of nowhere town. And so all of these things seem to tie back to this idea of, you know, I don't know why people so closely relate skinwalkers to Courage the Cowardly Dog.
Yeah.
But I guess there are like some references there. Courage can like shape shift, and you know, it's this idea of someone kind of stalking you, coming to your home, targeting you, like a lot of the villains in this show do. They gain Eustace and Muriel's trust and come into their home and then try to abduct them in some way. But even though there are several bizarre stories and legends that are said to have inspired Courage's farmhouse, the only thing that has actually been confirmed by the writer Dilworth himself is that he was highly inspired by the Dust Bowl, and
Hmm.
hence Kansas, and that he also got inspiration to write the first pilot episode, the Chicken from Outer Space, during his time at a girlfriend's farm. And this is his quote about that experience. He said, "I was traveling out west visiting a farm that the family of my girlfriend lived and worked on. One late afternoon, we were sitting out on the porch having a refreshment. The wheat was rippling from the hot wind.
Mm.
It was like being on the sea. Fireflies turned the grass festive, admiring the monstrous clouds that dominate the sky out there. An intense ball of light suddenly appeared, and I was startled by the feeling that it was looking at us. And suddenly it disappeared. I asked my girlfriend, what was that? She replied, grinning, who knows? It was then that I started writing the alien chicken the next day. Uh, so, in looking at his kind of background, he has a lot of fascination with the idea of these, you know, rural areas having a lot
Hmm.
of paranormal happenstances and people spotting UFOs and things like that. And he was very Alien Chicken was originally going to be in black and white. It was going to be kind of an homage to the B horror films of the 40s and 50s. And so to me, I think his inspiration was probably more personal and from a love of horror. But I don't know. Weigh in. Let us know what you think. Do you think it was based in some form of reality? We may never know.
We may never
Um,
know. I do
don't
know that Truth and Consequences is a banger town name.
I know, right? Such a bizarre name for a town. Uh, and I do appreciate that Dilworth is very like, when people are like, this is our theory about the show, he's like, you're right, because my show is art and art can be interpreted any
Yeah.
way you want. So uh we'll probably never get any kind of clear answer in that regard, because he's always very just like, yeah, sure, that sounds great.
Cool.
Could be. uh but I mean, at the end of the day, it cannot be ignored. This show had a really big impact on the like landscape of what was happening for you know, film and cartoons and animation at this time, and was just a huge influential thing for a lot of us who grew up as spooky and horror lovers. If you somehow are here and have not listened to our Ruined by Goosebumps episode, we do talk a bit about
Ah,
Courage the
yes.
Cowardly Dog, and that's still to this day probably one of my favorite episodes we've done. But just, you know, the landscape we grew up in, the beautiful time of horror for children that would never get shown today. We grew up in the midst of something really cool and special, and Courage was definitely a formative show for young Midge.
Mhm.
So that's all I've got on this little show. I hope that many of you also watched this and enjoyed revisiting it. I hope I unlocked some spooky doors in your brain and you remembered how traumatized you were by Fred and King Ramses. If you are enjoying listening to this podcast, we would absolutely love if you would consider leaving us a review and rating wherever you are listening. And we do like to leave those here. We don't like to leave them. We like to read them. And you can get extra creative if you want. If you don't listen on Apple Podcasts and you can't leave us a review where you're listening, you can DM us, much like I believe our pal did today.
Why, yes. Today we have a review from Jasmine, who gave us far,
A
five
5-star
star,
review.
a 5-star rating, a 5-star rating on Spotify, and DM'd us her review since they do not do reviews on that platform. Jasmine says, 10 out of 10 stars. I look
Yay.
forward to each new episode every week. These ghouls are so fun and funny, and I want to do chores around the house just so I can listen. Thank you for all the work you put into the podcast, Penny and Midge. Heart.
Oh, 5 stars for each of us. I love when
Five
that
stars
happens.
for each of us. I do love that.
Well, if you would like to see some horrifying photos of creatures from Courage the Cowardly Dog, you can follow us over on Instagram at Ghouls Night In Pod. And you can also check out there. We have merch for the show. If you want a t shirt or a sticker or a tote bag with our ghoulish faces on it, you can get one of those right over there. And if you are looking for me, you can find me across all platforms at Midge Munster.
And you can find me at Penny Snark.
And until next time,
Goodbye.
goodbye.